I'm very excited about this video. In one of my previous videos, I mentioned why I started my YouTube channel, Daring to Speak. In that video, I mentioned that I wanted to help people with their English, especially international students, immigrants, and those who feel stuck with their English. And the second reason was that I wanted to share my expertise in and insights into leadership, followership, design thinking, missional churches, and ministry in general. So today's video is the very first video on leadership. So in this video, I'll share 8 lessons I've learned over the years about leadership. Please make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit that like and notification buttons. So let's jump in. The very first lesson I want to share with you about leadership is that you have to overcome self-doubt. Leadership begins with knowing who you are and what your role in the overall mission of the organization is. You have to remember your identity as well as your role in the organization. And that is why you are hired in the first place. You're hired to participate in and contribute to the mission of the organization. But when you forget them, you will drift off and things will begin to go out of control. And also when things do not work out and when you face difficulties, then you will develop this self-doubt. Self-doubt can paralyze you. This self-doubt can creep up on all of us, regardless of our race, ethnicity, language, and background. And you might remember some of the questions that you might have asked yourself in your self-doubt. Questions like, is this happening because of my race? Is this happening because of my background? Is this happening because of the way I look or because of the way I speak? And is this happening because of my gender? Or is it because of my age? So is this happening because of you fill in the blank? And those are some of the questions that might arise that might paralyze you when you find yourself in self-doubt. And if you yield to this self-doubt, then you will start complaining and you will get stressed out. Eventually, you will become very negative, and also you might end up leaving the work that you once loved so much. I remember a time when I was working as an English-speaking pastor for an English-speaking congregation. When things were not working out, one of the self-doubting questions came to my mind was, is this happening because I was not born and raised up here in the United States? In other words, is this happening because I was not a native speaker? Nobody told me anything negative or critical about my English. As a matter of fact, many people did compliment my English, especially considering the fact that I was not 1.5 or second generation Korean American. When you find yourself in self-doubt, that kind of question can easily arise. I also remember a time when I was working in an American organization where the majority of people were Americans. When I had a relationship challenge, one of the self-doubting questions was, is this happening because of my race? When race wasn't really the issue at the time. So what do you do when you find yourself in self-doubt? When self-doubt creeps up on you, you need to take a hard look at yourself and the work that you do. And if you find any areas of improvement, then you can work on them. And you can also ask for help. You can reach out to those people who care about you and share your self-doubt with them in order to see whether your self-doubt is really valid. Many times, this self-doubt will turn out unwarranted and groundless. And also remember why and how you're hired in the first place. You're hired because the search committee and the organization screened you and checked all the information about you, your background, your skill sets, your experience, your expertise, and the references about you. Although you might doubt about yourself, but others might not. So far, I've mentioned examining yourself, asking for help, finding areas of improvement, reaching out to others for their feedback. And one more thing that you can do when you find yourself in self-doubt, and that is to persist and prevail. When you persist and prevail, not only do you develop grit and endurance, but you also develop love for your organization. And another thing that you need to bear in mind is that you need to be kind to yourself. You need to love yourself, and you yourself need to be on your own side. So the first leadership lesson is overcome self-doubt. Let's move on to the next one. The second leadership lesson is be an expert in your area of work and contribute. I remember reading an article about a company that decided to hire a Korean as their CEO, even though his English was not that fluent. He was chosen because of his expertise and love of the organization. Your ability to communicate in English is important, but definitely it's not the most important thing. When you have an expertise in your area of work, people will turn to you for help and advice, and you become an essential and integral part of the organization. That is why you need to continue to learn and grow in your contribution to the organization. After all, your influence in the organization is in proportion to your contribution to the organization. Your love of and commitment to and sacrifice for the organization is what makes you a leader. The person who has the most influence in any organization is the person who sacrifices the most for that organization. In the foreword of Robert Greenleaf's book, Servant Leadership, Stephen Covey observes, sacrifice is the essence of moral authority, and humility is the foundational attribute of sacrifice. So the one who makes the most sacrifice for the organization is the one who has the greatest moral authority, and also he is the servant leader who exercises humility. The person who sacrifices the most in an organization is definitely the person who has the greatest influence in that organization. So leading without official authority or power is also leadership. So the second leadership lesson is be an expert in your area of work and contribute. The third leadership lesson is be real and vulnerable. Since I grew up in a culture, so-called shame and face culture, where face is important, it's not natural for me to open up and share my vulnerabilities. I am aware that this is not natural for North Americans either, as Brene points out in her books such as Daring Greatly and Dare to Lead. However, it's even harder for agents to open up and share their vulnerabilities. On a positive note, however, if you open up and share your vulnerabilities, you develop great courage, because vulnerability is the fuel for courage. The more you hold back and suppress your feelings, the less courageous and real you become. However, you can change that with the realization that when you open up and share vulnerabilities, not only do you empower yourself, but you also empower others. So the third leadership lesson is be real and vulnerable. The fourth leadership lesson is network and collaborate. Asians and Africans are harmony-seeking people. That is, we are easy to network and collaborate with. We like to work as a team or as a community. Personally, I think we need to speak our minds more often, throw out more ideas, and feel less inhibited about expressing ourselves. At times, we don't want to stand out culturally nor rock the boat. Accommodation is easier. That is why a lot of times Asians and sometimes Africans don't share what they really feel or think unless they are asked to share. However, it won't help networking nor collaboration much. We need to speak our minds and be assertive when necessary. And one thing we all need to be aware of is territorial spirit. The territorial spirit, or this is my term, so you keep out mentality, does not help the organization. Everyone in the organization needs to work together for the common good and mission of the organization. We all need to fight the territorial spirit. So the fourth leadership lesson is network and collaborate. The fifth leadership lesson is use your agent values, such as gratitude, respect, and a strong work ethic to your advantage. I remember reading an interesting article about how Korean women and Jewish men are attracted to one another, and the marriage rate is on the rise. What attracts them to one another are values such as respect for family and education and a commitment to a strong work ethic. Agents work hard and they show up for work. In other words, agents are dependable. Agents also are people of gratitude, and they respect people in authority and power because of the hierarchical nature of agent culture. That is why it's hard for agents to stand to and speak against those in authority when they do wrong. It takes courage to do so. The challenge culture is foreign to agent values. That is why being able to navigate the differences between agent values and European values and using the needed values is an asset of which one should be proud. So the fifth leadership lesson is use your agent values to your advantage. The sixth leadership lesson is develop your voice and speak your mind. Agents don't grow up encouraged to speak up or ask questions. It takes much courage to be able to speak up and ask questions. And many times you have to be very tactful. However, in North American context, asking questions and speaking up are encouraged. In other words, there's a culture favorable to developing one's voice. Your opinions and your thoughts and your views are important and welcome. You will hear no question is a dumb question. I believe agents need to be more vocal and assertive at work and in class, although doing it in moderation will be helpful. Finding one's voice or developing one's voice takes time, courage, and efforts, but eventually it'll pay off. Leaders should be able to speak their minds, have their voices, while at the same time being able to listen to others' voices as well. So the sixth leadership lesson is develop your voice and speak your mind. The seventh leadership lesson is seek to continue to grow in the areas of communication expertise, and networking. Having a growth mindset over against a fixed mindset is important. Any individual or organization that stops learning stops growing. Work on your communication skills and expand your expertise. And study the history and culture of your organization. Investing in these areas might not be urgent, but essential, which will affect your productivity later on. No individuals or organizations that stop learning will be good leaders. Also, forming new relationships and networks will continue to help you grow as a leader as well. The 8th leadership lesson is love and serve people. Growing our leadership should start and end with love of people. As Jesus said, we don't rule over people nor boss them around. Rather, we seek to be the last and least, taking the form of a servant, as Jesus did in Philippians chapter 2, verse 7. After all, a leader who is not a servant in the vision and mission of the organization, along with its constituents, is not a true leader, as Robert Greenleaf so eloquently pointed out in his book, Servant Leadership. Our leadership is in proportion to our servanthood. So I've shared 8 leadership lessons I've learned over the years. The first lesson was overcome self-doubt. The second leadership lesson was be an expert in your area of work and contribute. And the third leadership lesson was be real and vulnerable. And the fourth leadership lesson was network and collaborate. And the fifth leadership lesson was use your agent values to your advantage. And the 6th lesson was develop your voice and speak your mind. And the 7th leadership lesson was continue to grow in the areas. And the 7th leadership lesson was seek to continue to grow in the areas of communication, expertise, and networking. And the last one was love and serve people. I hope that you've enjoyed these 8 leadership lessons I've shared with you. My hope and prayer is that you will continue to grow in your influence and contribution to your organization as a leader. Please make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit that like and notification buttons. Stay safe and keep daring to speak.